Last door swung open before she could reach for it, and two security guards stepped into her path like they'd been waiting. Ma'am, this event is by invitation only. Serena Voss held up the card. Cream stock, gold embossed seal, her name printed in the center. She'd received it 3 weeks ago, hand-delivered by courier, tucked inside a leather envelope with the Hargrove Medical Center logo pressed into the flap. Guard took it, looked at it, handed it back without fully reading it. You have a badge? All medical staff are using the side entrance tonight. She wasn't medical staff. She wasn't there to serve. She was there because Dr. Burton Hargrove III had sent a personal invitation to the woman whose foundation had quietly funded the construction of the wing they were celebrating tonight. But the guard didn't know that. He looked at her. 29 years old, dark skin, wearing a navy dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion, and decided what she was before she opened her mouth. I'm not staff, Serena said. I'm a guest. Guest list is being managed at the front. If you'd like to wait outside, I have an invitation. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step aside. She stepped aside, not because she was afraid, not because she didn't have every right to walk through that door. She stepped aside because she already knew how this ended. She'd known since the moment the courier arrived at her office with that envelope. She just needed them to confirm it. Hargrove family had been building things in this city for 4 generations. They built bridges, hospitals, parking structures, schools with their names on the walls. They gave money at ceremonies and received applause, and their photographs appeared in the society pages, with captions about legacy and generosity. What the society pages rarely mentioned was where the money came from. Not all of it, anyway. Hargrove Foundation had been operating at a quiet deficit for 11 years. Not public knowledge, the kind of thing that stays inside boardrooms and legal retainers and very discreet conversations. The kind of thing that gets solved when someone with real capital decides it's worth solving. As someone had been Serena Voss. Her firm, Voss Capital Partners, had been approached by a Hargrove Foundation liaison in the winter of 2 years ago. They needed a private investor to bridge a funding gap on the new oncology wing. A $38 million project that had stalled mid-construction when their primary donor pulled out. The project had federal visibility. A senator had already done a press event at the groundbreaking. It couldn't fail quietly. Serena had done her due diligence. She'd reviewed the financials, consulted her team, walked the construction site in work boots on a Tuesday morning when no press were there. She'd written the check. $38 million structured as a recoverable grant tied to naming rights and board advisory access. The wing was called the Hargrove Oncology Pavilion. Her name appeared on a brass plate inside the donor wall, small font near the bottom, which was fine. She hadn't done it for the plate. She'd done it because her mother had died of ovarian cancer in a hospital 3 states away because there was no adequate facility nearby. She'd been 22 years old, sitting in a vinyl chair, watching monitors. She swore then that she would build something. She didn't care whose name went on the outside. But she cared about tonight. Gala was held inside the Hargrove Center's grand atrium, a glass and marble space that the architecture firm had described in their press materials as luminous. Chandeliers hung low over a room full of people in black tie. A string quartet played near the east wall. Waitstaff moved silently with trays. Serena had finally gotten through the door after producing the invitation twice, spelling her name once, and waiting while a woman with a clipboard looked her up on a printed sheet and found her name third from the top, listed as Principal Donor, Voss Capital Partners. The woman with the clipboard said nothing. She gestured toward the atrium. Inside, the room was warm and bright, and full of conversation that stopped in small patches when Serena walked through. Not dramatically. Not all at once, just the way sound sometimes shifts when something unexpected enters a familiar space. She found her table. The seating card was there. Serena Voss Capital Partners. She set her clutch on the chair and stood for a moment, taking in the room. And Dr. Burton Hargrove III was near the podium with his wife, Constance Hargrove, and their son, Dr. Elliot Hargrove, who had recently been appointed director of the new pavilion. Burton was 71, silver-haired, the kind of man who had learned to make authority look effortless. Constance was beside him in a white gown, accepting compliments with practiced grace. Elliot stood slightly apart, checking his phone. Serena had met Burton once, briefly in a conference room 18 months ago. He'd shaken her hand and thanked her and then turned back to his lawyer. She understood. The money was what mattered. The person attached to it was secondary. As she was getting a glass of water from the table when Constance Hargrove appeared beside her. Not to greet her, to address someone just past her shoulder. "Excuse me," Constance said, her voice pleasant and unhurried. "Would you mind moving? We need this space for family photos." Lena turned. There was no photographer. There was no family assembled. There was only a cluster of event staff several feet away and a woman, Constance Hargrove, looking at her the way people look at something in the wrong place. "I'm at this table," Serena said. Constance glanced at the seating card, then at Serena. The glance lasted just long enough. "I think there may have been a mix-up with the seating. This section is reserved. It has my name on it." "L." Constance smiled with her mouth. "These things happen. I'm sure someone can find you another spot." I turned and walked away before Serena could respond. Not because she'd finished the conversation. Because as far as Constance Hargrove was concerned, the conversation had never required her full attention. Elliot Hargrove found Serena 20 minutes later near the donor wall, reading the names. Heard him before she saw him. His voice carried the particular confidence of someone who has never had to lower it. "That section's not really open to." "Oh," he stopped, reassessed. "You must be one of the caterer's guests. They sometimes bring plus ones. I'm Serena Voss." N. He blinked. "N. Voss Capital." Pause then. "Right, yes, of course. My father mentioned." "Or father invited me." "Absolutely. Yes." He straightened. "Well, welcome. Enjoy the evening." Walked away the same direction his mother had gone. Serena watched him and then turned back to the donor wall. She found her name on the brass plate. Small font near the bottom. She ran one finger across the letters. Then she went back to her table. A program began at 7:30. Burton Hargrove took the podium to applause that filled the atrium easily. He spoke about legacy. He spoke about the 4 generations of Hargroves who had shaped this city. He spoke about the new pavilion as an extension of that tradition, a gift to the community, a testament to what a family could build when it committed to something larger than itself. He did not mention Serena Voss. Mentioned the federal grant. He mentioned the senator's office. He mentioned the Hargrove Foundation's endowment. He thanked the architects and the construction firm and the medical staff who would bring the pavilion to life. He did not mention the $38 million that had kept the project alive when it nearly died. Serena sat at her table with her water glass and listened. Beside her, an older woman named Dr. Philippa Osi, a retired oncologist she'd been seated next to, leaned in quietly. "Or the Voss Capital investor, aren't you?" Philippa said. "Yes. I didn't mention you." No." Philippa looked at the podium, then back at Serena. "Are you going to do something about that?" Serena picked up her water glass. "I already did." What happened next began quietly, the way most things that matter begin. A woman in the third row of tables, a journalist named Mara Chu, who covered the philanthropy beat for the city's largest paper, had been doing background research on the Hargrove Pavilion for 6 weeks. She'd found the public records. She'd found the gap in the foundation's timeline. She'd found Voss Capital Partners. I'd also found Serena's name conspicuously absent from every press release the Hargrove Foundation had issued about the pavilion. Was at the gala because she'd been credentialed for the evening program. She'd spent the first hour watching. She'd watched Serena get stopped at the door. She'd watched Constance redirect her away from the table. She'd watched Elliot's double take and retreat. At 7:58, while Burton was still speaking, Mara opened her laptop and began writing. A story went up at 8:41 while dessert was being served. Serena's phone buzzed at 8:43. It was her communications director, a sharp woman named Opal Reeves, who sent a single message. "It's out. Mara Chu, City Journal. Front page digital. You're going to want to read it." Serena excused herself from the table and stepped into the corridor outside the atrium. The hallway was quiet, the marble floors reflecting the overhead lights. She read the article standing beside a potted orchid. The headline was, "Hargrove Pavilion funded by outside investor who was never mentioned in a single press release." Mara had done it correctly. She'd cited public records. She'd cited the grant agreement, which was a matter of non-profit disclosure law. She'd documented the timeline of the foundation's financial deficit and Voss Capital's intervention. She'd included a photograph of the donor wall with Serena's name circled in small text at the bottom. Also included a paragraph about the evening's events, sourced, Serena noticed, from multiple witnesses describing the door, the table, Constance's smile. Investor whose capital saved the Hargrove Pavilion arrived at tonight's celebration and was directed to use the side entrance. She was asked to move from her assigned table. Her name was not spoken once from the stage. Irina put her phone in her clutch. She stood in the hallway for a moment. She was not particularly surprised. She was not shaking. She was something quieter than angry. The kind of settled she got when a deal closed exactly the way she'd modeled it. They walked back into the atrium. A room had changed. Not visibly, not all at once. But the energy of a room shifts when a story breaks about the people standing inside it, and enough guests had checked their phones in the last 4 minutes that the shift had begun. A cluster near the bar was talking in lowered voices. Someone had turned a phone screen towards someone else. The string quartet had stopped between pieces and not started again. Burton was no longer at the podium. He was standing near the side wall with his lawyer, a man Serena recognized from the contract negotiations, and 2 other men she didn't know. His face was a careful neutral. Constance was seated at the family table. Her hands were flat on the tablecloth. Elliot had his phone out. Serena walked back to her table, sat down, and picked up her water glass. Philippa looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "Or doing?" Philippa asked. "A journalist doing," Serena said. And the journalist?" Irina said nothing, which was its own answer. Burton Hargrove crossed the room at 9:14. Moved with the deliberate calm of a man who had managed crises before, he reached Serena's table, pulled out the empty chair across from her without asking, and sat down. He was still wearing his smile, but it had been adjusted for the occasion. Smaller, more careful. "Ms. Voss," he said, "I wanted to take a moment to personally—" "Burton." She said his first name the way he'd said hers in that conference room 18 months ago. Correctly, professionally, and without warmth. "You don't need to do that." Arid, he stopped. "I don't need an apology," she said. "I don't need an acknowledgement from the stage. I didn't come tonight for either of those things." "Yeah," he waited. "I came tonight because I wanted to see it." She looked toward the corridor that led to the new pavilion wing, the glass doors visible at the far end of the atrium. The building, what it actually became. "It's remarkable," Burton said on reflex. "I know." She looked at him steadily. I've seen the plans for 3 other facilities I'm considering funding. The Oncology Center in Memphis, a pediatric wing in Cleveland, a rehabilitation center outside Atlanta. She set her water glass down. I came tonight because I was deciding whether the Hargrove Foundation would be part of any of those conversations. Smile was gone now. What replaced it was calculation, pure, professional, familiar. I see, he said. Article is already running, she said. I didn't call Mara. She found the public records herself, but I want you to understand something clearly. She leaned forward slightly. What your wife did at that table, what the guard at the door decided, what your son assumed in 30 seconds. None of that is a surprise to me. I've been in rooms like this my entire career. I came anyway because the building matters. The patients who will use it matter. I stood, picked up her clutch. But I will not fund the next project through a foundation that considers me a liability to hide. If that changes, Opal Reeves has my contact information. She looked at him once more. Good evening, Burton. Walked across the atrium. The room watched without quite watching, the way rooms do. The string quartet had started again, something understated. The chandeliers threw the same light they always had. Paused at the entrance to the pavilion corridor. The doors were propped open. The dedication had been earlier, before the dinner. The hallway beyond was quiet and softly lit. She walked in. The owner wall inside the pavilion was different from the one in the atrium. It was the full wall, floor to ceiling, with names arranged by contribution level. At the very top, in letters considerably larger than the ones on the atrium plaque, was a name the Hargrove Foundation had been contractually required to place there, regardless of their feelings about it. Os Capital Partners, Principal Donor. She stood and read it. She thought about her mother. She thought about the vinyl chair and the monitors and the hospital 3 states away. She thought about the 22-year-old who had made a quiet promise in a room that smelled like antiseptic and grief. Then she took out her phone and called Opal. Set up a call with the Memphis team for Monday, she said, and pull the Cleveland file. I want to look at it again. Hung up. The hallway was still quiet. Somewhere behind her, the gala continued, the conversation redistributed, the evening resolving itself into whatever it would become by morning. Brass letters on the wall did not care about any of that. And they said what they said. They had said it since the day the wall was installed, and they would say it long after tonight's embarrassments had been absorbed and explained away and forgotten by everyone except the people they had happened to. Dana Voss walked back through the corridor and out through the glass doors into the cool night air. A valet brought her car around without being asked. She got in. On her phone, 3 missed calls from board members she recognized. 2 texts from people she'd never met, journalists by the look of the numbers. A voicemail from a colleague in Chicago who'd seen the article and wanted to talk. Then she set the phone on the seat beside her and drove. The city moved past the windows the way it always did, lit and indifferent and full of people making their small decisions about who matters and who doesn't, who gets the front door and who gets the side entrance, whose name goes at the top and whose goes near the bottom in small font, as if letters on a wall could tell you something true about a person. Can't, but buildings can. Buildings stay. And this one had her name on it, right where it belonged. I keep thinking about that brass plate. Small font, near the bottom. Her name right there on the wall of a building she paid for. And still they pointed her to the side entrance. That's the part that stays with me. Not the rudeness itself, because rudeness from people like the Hargroves is almost predictable. What stays with me is what Serena did with it. She didn't explode, didn't demand a public apology on the spot. She just watched. She let the evening unfold exactly the way she knew it would, and she let other people draw their own conclusions, which they did, Because that's what happens when you act with that kind of quiet, unshakable clarity. I think about integrity a lot. Real integrity, not the kind people perform for an audience. Serena didn't fund that oncology wing to get her name on a stage. She did it because her mother died in a hospital 3 states away, because there wasn't something better close enough, because she was 22 years old and made a promise in a room full of grief. That promise had nothing to do with the Hargroves. It was never about them. That's what they couldn't understand. And it's also why they lost. When you do something for the right reason, truly the right reason, not the version of it that sounds good in a speech, it can't be taken from you. Burton could erase her name from every press release. Constance could redirect her away from the table with that practiced smile. Elliot could walk away without finishing his sentence. None of that changed what was on the wall inside the pavilion. None of that changed what the building was or who made it possible. The thing itself remained. There's also something about intelligence I can't stop thinking about. Not book intelligence, the other kind. The kind that lets you read a room and decide what it's actually telling you. Serena knew, and from the moment that courier arrived with the leather envelope, exactly what the evening might be. She came anyway because she was gathering information, prostrate. She was watching to see if the people she might work with again were who she suspected they were. When they confirmed it, guard at the door, table redirect, speech that never said her name, she didn't get emotional about it. She made a business decision. The Memphis Project, the Cleveland File. Monday morning. That's what clear thinking looks like under pressure. And the persistence. $38 million into a foundation that had been quietly failing for 11 years, run by people who would seat her near the bottom of every donor wall, and hope she was grateful for that. They did it anyway, because the patients mattered more than the politics. That kind of staying power, showing up, doing the work, not letting other people's smallness determine the size of what you build. That's the thing I find genuinely hard to teach and impossible to fake. What the Hargroves did to Serena that night revealed more about them than anything they could have said from the podium, and what Serena did in response. The phone call to Opal, the drive home, the next project already in motion, revealed everything about her. Some people spend their whole lives trying to get into the room. Serena just kept building better rooms.